My son left for work one morning 25 years ago and never came back. The police found his car abandoned by the river gorge, but they never found a body. We buried an empty casket, and I spent 2 decades mourning a ghost while his wife played the grieving widow. But yesterday, while eating cold lentil soup down in the basement, I saw a face on the 700 news that stopped my heart. It was a billionaire real estate tycoon in Portland, cutting the ribbon on a new skyscraper. He had a different name and expensive clothes, but when the camera zoomed in, I saw the crescent-shaped scar on his chin. I gave him that scar, stitching him up on our kitchen table when he was 10 years old. That was my son. He was alive, and when I called out for his wife, she didn't look surprised. She looked terrified. That was the moment I understood my entire life had been a fabrication built by the 2 people I had loved most. My name is Gordon Merritt, and for the last 5 years I have lived in the basement of the house I paid for. My daughter-in-law Nadine tells the neighbors she is a saint for taking care of her senile father-in-law. She tells them I am confused, that my mind is slipping, and that I need constant supervision. But the truth is much simpler. I am in the way. Welcome back to Family Revenge Stories, where the most powerful tales come from real lives and real pain. If stories like this one find you where you live, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe and give this a like. It means more than you know. Before we go any further, drop one word in the comments that describes exactly how you're feeling right now. Just one word, I want to hear it. A quick note before we begin: some elements of this story have been shaped for the ear, and any resemblance to specific living people is purely coincidental. What matters is the truth at the heart of it. I am a budget line item she wants to erase. The basement is cold and reeks of mildew. There is one small window near the ceiling, just enough to tell me whether it is day or night. Dinner that evening was lentil soup again. Lukewarm, flavorless, because Nadine insists salt is bad for my blood pressure. I think she just wants me to lose my appetite and disappear a little faster. I settled into my worn-out armchair, the only piece of my old life she allowed me to keep, and switched on the small television. It is my one window to the world outside these walls. Nadine controls the cable box upstairs, so I watch whatever she decides is suitable for a man she claims has dementia. Cartoons usually, old reruns. But tonight she must have forgotten herself because the local news came on. I was half-heartedly moving my spoon through the soup, barely listening, when the anchor broke in with a special report out of Eugene. A technology and real estate conglomerate called Vane Group was breaking ground on a billion-dollar tower. The reporter could barely contain herself, breathless over the visionary CEO who had appeared from nowhere and seized the market. Then the camera swung to the podium. A man in a bespoke charcoal suit stepped up to the microphone. The chyron on the screen read, "Elliot Vane, CEO." Silver at his temples. The kind of composure that only obscene wealth can manufacture. He smiled at the crowd and spoke of legacy, of building toward the future. My spoon dropped into the bowl and soup splashed across my lap. I did not feel the warmth. I could not draw a breath. The voice was deeper, more polished, but the rhythm of it was exactly the same. The way he tilted his head to the left when he paused mid-thought. The grip of both hands on the sides of the podium. It was Caleb, my Caleb. My mind fought it. Grief bends a parent's perception, I know that. Over the last 25 years, I have spotted my son in the faces of strangers more times than I can count. I have followed young men down sidewalks because they had his stride or his hair color, only to stammer out an apology when they turned around and showed me a stranger's face. But this was not that. The camera tightened on his face as he laughed at something the mayor said. And there it was. Left side of his chin, just below the lip, a thin white line curving like a crescent moon. A jagged little scar. He earned it at 10 years old, trying to launch his bicycle over the creek behind our house. He came down chin first onto a rock. We had no health insurance then, so I cleaned the wound with rubbing alcohol and closed it myself, sewing needle fishing line, while he squeezed my hand and fought back tears. No two scars are alike. That one was my work. That was my son. He was not dead. He was Elliot Vane. I came out of my chair so fast it toppled behind me. I lurched toward the television, hands trembling so badly I could hardly press my fingers to the screen. I traced the line of his jaw. Older, harder, but alive. He had been alive this whole time, while I wept over an empty grave, while I paid for his memorial, while I held his weeping wife and told her it would be all right. He was raising an empire in Eugene. Nadine. The sound that tore out of me was something guttural, something I did not recognize as my own voice. Nadine, get down here. Footsteps heavy and unhurried crossed the ceiling above me. Then the door at the top of the stairs swung open. Nadine came down her heels, striking each wooden step with a sharp click. She had on her yoga outfit and an expression of pure irritation. Being interrupted, especially during her evening glass of wine, was something she did not forgive. "What is it, Gordon?" she snapped, planting herself at the foot of the stairs with her hands on her hips. "You spilled your soup. I am not cleaning that up. You are behaving like a child." I didn't answer. I leveled a shaking finger at the television screen. Look at him." Nadine rolled her eyes and turned toward the TV. She started something dismissive, probably that I shouldn't let the news upset me, but the words dried up. I watched her face. The color drained from her cheeks. Her eyes went wide. Her mouth parted. This was not the bewilderment of someone who did not understand. It was the shock of someone who had been caught. For just a moment, the grieving widow mask slipped, and what I saw underneath was cold arithmetic. She recognized him at once. "Otta, that is Caleb," I said, my voice scraped raw. "That is my son. He is alive, Nadine. Look at the scar." She stared at the screen a beat longer, her mind visibly running calculations. Then she moved. She lunged for the remote on the side table. "Give me that!" she hissed and punched the power button hard. The screen went black. My son's face disappeared, leaving only our reflections in the dark glass. Mine a disheveled old man. Hers a woman caught in a lie. "Turn it back on," I said, moving toward her. "I need to hear him. I need to know why." "Stop it, Dad," she barked in the condescending register she kept for doctors and neighbors. "You are having an episode. This is exactly what Dr. Colton warned us about. You are hallucinating." "I am not hallucinating," I roared. "That was Caleb. He has the scar, Nadine, the scar I put there. He is Elliot Vane. I saw the name." Nadine took a step back, her face setting into stone. "There is no Elliot Vane, Gordon. That was some random man on the evening news. Caleb died 25 years ago. We buried him. Do you remember the funeral, the flowers? Your mind is turning on you. It is the dementia. It is getting worse." She had been doing this for years, chipping away at my memory, my judgment, my grip on reality. But this time I had seen something real, and it was sharper than anything she could dull. "I know what I saw," I said, dropping my voice to a quiet that I meant to be threatening. "And I saw your face, Nadine. You weren't confused that he looked like Caleb. You were frightened because I noticed." She said nothing. Instead, she crossed to the medicine cabinet bolted to the wall beside the laundry sink, unlocked it with the key on the chain she wore around her neck, and retrieved the orange bottle, the heavy sedatives, the ones that turned my thoughts into something slow and thick, the ones that put me under for 12 hours at a stretch. You are agitated, she said, shaking 2 pills into her palm. Her hand was not quite steady. You need to settle down before you hurt yourself. Take these now. I pressed my lips together and backed up until the cold concrete wall stopped me. No, I am not taking those. I need to call the police. I need to call the station in Eugene. Nadine laughed a short, arid sound. Call the police with what, Gordon? I had the landline removed last week, remember? And you have no cell phone. Who do you think they will believe? A wealthy, respected widow or a senile old man who lives in a basement and sees ghosts on television. She closed the distance between us. Younger than me, stronger than me, driven by something close to panic. She seized my jaw in one hand, her nails pressing into the loose skin. Take the pills, Gordon, or shall I call the orderlies from Quiet Pines tonight? You know they are waiting on my word. There is a bed in the memory care ward with your name on it. Quiet Pines. The state facility. The place people went to die in hallways that smelled of urine and bleach. Her final weapon. I opened my mouth. She pressed the pills onto my tongue and lifted a glass of water to my lips. Swallow, she ordered. I took a sip. Felt the pills ride back. Swallowed. Good, she said, releasing my jaw and wiping her palm on her yoga skirt, the way you wipe off something unclean. Now sit. Relax. The hallucinations will pass. She pocketed the remote, walked to the stairs, and paused at the bottom to look back at me. Her eyes were flat and unreadable. Caleb is dead, Gordon. Never say that name again. If you breathe a word about Elliot Vane or scars or any of this nonsense to a single soul, I will have you committed before breakfast. Do you understand? I nodded slowly and sank back into my chair. She switched off the overhead light, leaving me in the gray half-dark from the basement window. I listened to her climb the stairs. I listened to the heavy deadbolt slide home. The moment her footsteps faded into the kitchen above, I leaned forward and spit the pills into my palm. I had been holding them under my tongue. It was a trick I had worked out 3 months ago when I realized the medication was stripping away memories I could not afford to lose. I crossed to the utility sink and washed them down the drain. I was not crazy. I spent 40 years as a forensic accountant before I retired. My whole career was built on finding patterns buried in numbers, pulling truth out of ledgers and spreadsheets that people had arranged to deceive. My son was alive. He was a billionaire. And the woman upstairs who had been cashing his life insurance checks and occupying my house for 1/4 of a century knew exactly where he was. I sat back in the darkness listening to the furnace hum. My hands were still trembling, but my mind was sharper than it had been in years. They believed I was a helpless old man, a burden to be managed and contained. But they had committed a fatal error. They had let me see the truth. And before the sun rose the next morning, I intended to find out exactly what Nadine and my son had set in motion. I was not going to Quiet Pines. I was going to war. I did not sleep that night. I lay on the lumpy basement mattress, staring up at the ceiling tiles, listening to the house creak and settle above me. Every groan of the floorboards felt like a warning. My mind churned through memories and calculations. I replayed that news broadcast over and over, the scar, the tilt of the head, the name Elliot Vane. It was impossible. And yet it was the only explanation that fit. For 25 years I had worn my grief like a heavy coat, and in one single moment it had been torn from my back, leaving me exposed in the cold glare of betrayal. When daylight finally began to bleed through the small basement window, I heard the garage door motor hum to life. It was early, far too early for Nadine to be heading to the yoga club. I waited for the sound of her engine turning over, but it never came. Instead, a car door slammed and then silence settled. She was sitting in her car inside the closed garage. It was the one spot in the house she believed was truly soundproof. I moved. My joints were stiff from the cold and the tension, but adrenaline is a remarkable fuel. I crept up the wooden stairs, placing my feet along the outer edges where the boards were least likely to squeak. I reached the door at the top. Locked from the outside as always, but there was a gap between the door and the floor, a narrow seam where sound could pass through. I pressed my ear flat against the cold wood. At first I caught only muffled fragments swallowed by the walls in the distance. I held my breath. I needed to hear. I needed to know. Then her voice cut through sharp, panicked. "He saw you, Elliot. He recognized the scar." My heart stopped. She was not calling him Caleb. She was calling him Elliot. She had absorbed his new identity so thoroughly that his given name, the name I chose for him, no longer existed in her mouth. "I know it was a mistake," she hissed. "I told him he was hallucinating. I gave him the heavy dose, but he is not accepting it this time. He is pushing back. He mentioned the police." A pause while she listened to whoever was on the other end. My son. The billionaire. The ghost. No, we cannot simply wait," she snapped. "He is dangerous, Elliot. He knows too much. If he gets out, if he speaks to anyone, your IPO, your reputation, all of it goes up in smoke. We have to accelerate the timeline. Accelerate the timeline." The phrase hung in the stale air of the stairwell like a blade suspended above my neck. They had a plan. They had always had a plan. I was just an expiration date that had not yet arrived. "Yes, I know the place," she said, her voice falling to a conspiratorial murmur. "Quiet Pines. It is cheap. It is dirty. They do not ask questions as long as the check clears. They have a lockdown unit for difficult cases. Once he is in there, he will never come out. He will just be another babbling old man that nobody listens to." I backed away from the door, gripping the railing to keep my shaking legs from giving out beneath me. Quiet Pines. I knew the place. A converted warehouse on the edge of town where the state deposited the indigent and the unwanted. A place where people went to rot. That was her solution. That was my son's solution. Bury me alive somewhere that smelled of bleach and despair so they could protect their millions. I heard the garage door rumble open again. She was coming back inside. I scrambled down the stairs and threw myself into the armchair just seconds before her footsteps crossed the kitchen floor. I grabbed a magazine and pretended to read, my heart slamming against my ribs like something caged. I needed help. I needed a lifeline. Wait, the kitchen phone. Nadine had claimed she removed the landline, but maybe that was a lie. Maybe she had only unplugged it. It was the only thread I had. I waited until the shower started running upstairs. The pipes in this old house moan loudly when the water is on. It would cover the sound of my movement. I went to the basement door. To my surprise, it was unlocked. She must have forgotten to throw the deadbolt in her panic. Or perhaps she assumed the sedatives had already made a vegetable of me. I slipped into the kitchen. After the gloom of the basement, the brightness was blinding. I scanned the counter. The phone base was sitting right there. My heart surged. I crossed to it and lifted the receiver. Silence. No dial tone, no static, just a dead hollow nothing. I pulled the unit away from the wall. The cord had not been unplugged. It had been cut. The copper wires were frayed and splayed, severed with a pair of kitchen shears. This was not a disconnection. It was an act of violence. She had not just cut the line, she had cut my throat. "What do you think you are doing, Gordon?" I spun around. Nadine was standing in the doorway wrapped in a plush white bathrobe, her hair wet. No makeup, and without it she looked older, harder. Her eyes were flat and cold as flint chips. I was checking the time. I lied, my voice coming out thin and unconvincing. The clock downstairs is broken. She looked at the receiver in my hand, then at the severed cord. A thin, cruel smile crossed her lips. It is broken, Gordon, just like your mind. I told you that last night. Why do you keep fighting me? I am the only person who looks after you. She walked over and quietly took the receiver from my hand, setting it back on the cradle with a soft click. We need to discuss your living arrangements, she said, her tone shifting into that sickly sweet register she deployed when she was working an angle. I have been thinking a great deal since your episode last night. It is becoming too dangerous for you to be here on your own. You are seeing things. You are becoming aggressive. I am not aggressive, I said, drawing myself up as straight as my spine would allow. I am lucid, Nadine, and I know exactly what you are doing. She ignored me, pressing on with her prepared speech. I found a wonderful community for you. It is called Quiet Pines. They have specialists, Gordon doctors, who can address these hallucinations. There are activities gardens. It will be so much better than that dark basement. Gardens. She was calling a patch of dead grass hemmed in by a chain-link fence a garden. I am not going, I said flatly. This is my house. I paid for every brick in it. My name is on the deed. For now, she said casually, studying her fingernails. But we have an appointment with Dr. Harmon this afternoon. He is going to evaluate you, and given your violent outburst last night and your history of confusion, I am confident he will conclude that you require around-the-clock care. And once he signs those papers, Gordon, you will not have a choice. The state will grant me guardianship. She leaned in close, her perfume smelling of lilies and rot. And then I will sell this house. I will liquidate your accounts, and I will move to Eugene to be closer to better opportunities, and you will remain at Quiet Pines until the end. It is for the best. She turned and walked to the refrigerator, pulling out a carton of orange juice. Oh, and speaking of care, it is time for your medicine. You missed your morning dose when you were sneaking around up here. She reached into her pocket and produced the bottle. She shook 2 pills into her palm. They were blue this time, stronger. Open up, she commanded. I looked at her. I looked at the kitchen knives lined up on the magnetic strip. I looked at the back door. I could run, but I was 71 years old with bad knees and no money. She would catch me, or the police would, and she would tell them I was a danger to myself. I had to be smarter. I had to buy time. I let my shoulders drop. I let my face go slack, giving her the defeated look she needed to see. Fine, I whispered. Just let me rest. Good boy, she said. I opened my mouth. She placed the pills on my tongue. Her fingers tasted of soap. I accepted the glass of water she held and threw my head back, making a show of swallowing hard, but I did not swallow. I tucked the pills into the pocket of my cheek, wedged deep between my gums and the soft tissue. I had seen the trick done in a prison film once. I prayed it would hold. She studied me carefully, her eyes tracking my throat for the telltale movement. Satisfied, she smiled. There, that wasn't so hard, was it? Now go back downstairs and pack a small bag. The transport van will be here tomorrow morning at 8:00. Tomorrow. I had less than 24 hours. I shuffled back toward the basement door, moving slow, playing the part. I heard the lock thud shut behind me, the bolt sealing my fate. I went straight to the utility sink and spat the blue pills into the drain, watching them dissolve to a chalky smear before rinsing them away. They thought they had won. They thought I was a muddled old man who would shuffle quietly into the dark, but they had forgotten who I used to be. I was the man who uncovered the hidden assets in the Enron investigation. I was the man who traced illicit funds through shell companies in the Cayman Islands. I crossed to the corner of the basement where my old filing cabinet sat rusting beneath a tarp. Nadine had gone through it years ago hunting for money, but she had only looked at the files. She had never looked at the cabinet itself. I reached behind the bottom drawer and felt for the metal latch I had fitted there 30 years ago. It clicked. The false bottom of the drawer popped free. Inside was not money. It was something worth far more. My old lockpicking kit from my days working with the fraud unit and a prepaid burner phone I had purchased 5 years ago and stashed away for exactly this kind of emergency. I pressed the power button. The screen blinked to life. 15% battery. It was enough. I was not going to Quiet Pines. And I was not going to let Elliot Vane build his empire on my grave. I sat down on the cold floor tools in hand and waited for the house to go silent. The real game was just beginning. The quiet that settled after Nadine's Mercedes rolled out of the driveway was the loudest thing I had ever heard. I counted to 60 just to be certain she was not doubling back for a forgotten phone or a fresh coat of lipstick. Then I went to work. I had 2 hours, maybe 3 if the lawyer kept her waiting. For a man with nothing left to lose, that was a lifetime. And for what I needed to accomplish, it was barely a breath. I drew out the lockpick set. The metal picks were cold and familiar, a reassuring weight from a life I thought I had left behind. My hands were gnarled with arthritis and trembling with a rage that had nothing to do with age, but muscle memory is a formidable thing. I knelt in front of the basement door. The lock was a standard deadbolt, the kind sold at any hardware store for $20. It was an insult, honestly. She thought so little of me she had not even bothered with a decent lock. I inserted the tension wrench, then the rake. I closed my eyes and visualized the pins inside the cylinder. Click, click. A brief grinding resistance, then the smooth, clean rotation of the plug. The door swung open. I stepped onto the kitchen. It was a strange sensation standing in my own home as a trespasser. The air carried cleaning products and the stale odor of deception. I did not linger. I went straight upstairs to the room that had once been my study. Nadine had taken it over 5 years ago, converting it into her command center. She kept it locked at all times. This lock was harder a keypad lever, but Nadine was a creature of habit, and she was arrogant about it. She used the same 4-digit code for everything. The year she married my son. I punched it in. The light went green. The room was unrecognizable. My mahogany desk had been replaced by sleek glass and chrome. My books were gone, and in their place hung framed photos of her and Ivy on vacations I was never invited to. But I was not here for the decor. I moved straight to the wall behind the oversized abstract painting of a storm at sea. I knew the safe was there because I was the one who had installed it 30 years ago. Nadine had changed the combination, of course, but she did not know about the manufacturer override key slot hidden beneath the digital pad. And she certainly had no idea I had kept the master key taped to the underside of a floorboard in the closet since 1994. I retrieved the key and inserted it. The heavy steel door groaned open. My heart was hammering a frantic beat of fear and anticipation mixed together. I ignored the stacks of cash and the velvet jewelry boxes. I reached to the back of the safe for a thick manila envelope resting in the shadows. It bore no label. I emptied the contents onto the glass desk. Papers fanned out bank statements, but not from any local branch. These were from a private bank in the Cayman Islands. The account holder was Nadine Merritt. My accountant's eyes processed the columns faster than I could breathe. Every month on the first, without fail, a deposit of $50,000. The sender was Vane Group Eugene W.A. It felt like a fist to the stomach. $50,000 a month. That was the price of a mother's silence. That was the hush money my son paid to keep his past buried. She was not merely surviving on his life insurance. She was on his payroll. Beneath the statements, held together by a rubber band, was a bundle of postcards. The edges were soft and worn. I snapped the band and spread them out. They were all picture postcards from the city. The Portland sign, the Portland Saturday market, the ferry boats. I flipped one over. The handwriting was jagged, hurried but unmistakable. Happy 16th birthday, Ivy. I hope you got the car. Study hard. Signed with nothing more than a dash. Another happy graduation. I am proud of you. Another Merry Christmas. They were addressed to my granddaughter Ivy, but there were no postmarks. They had never been mailed. Nadine had intercepted them, or perhaps they had been delivered directly to her in a package to filter through. She had kept every one. Why? Trophies. Leverage. Proof that he existed, insurance in case the checks ever stopped. My son, Elliot Vane, had been writing to his daughter for years. He knew she was out there. He had watched her grow up from a distance, sending money and cards, while I rotted in the basement, believing he was dead. I was so absorbed in the betrayal, so lost in the paper trail of my own erasure, that I did not hear the front door open downstairs. I did not hear the light footsteps on the stairs. Grandpa. The voice made me jump so hard I nearly sent the lamp off the desk. I spun around. Ivy stood in the doorway. She was in her nurse's scrubs, her bag slipping from one shoulder. She had come home early from her shift. Her eyes swept the room, my face, the open safe, the documents scattered across the desk. She looked frightened. "What are you doing?" she whispered, retreating a half step. Mom said you were getting worse. She said you might get violent." I rose slowly, both hands raised. I knew how I looked. My hair was wild. My clothes were streaked with basement grime. I was standing over a pile of documents I had no business touching. "Ivy, listen to me," I said, my voice cracking. "I am not crazy. Your mother has been lying to you." She reached into her pocket, her hand unsteady. I knew exactly what she was reaching for. She was going to call Nadine. If that call went through, it was over. The orderlies would be here in 10 minutes. "Don't call her," I pleaded. "Please just look. Look at this." I gathered the postcards and the bank statement and held them out, my hand trembling. She hesitated, her thumb hovering over the screen. "Grandpa, you need to go back downstairs." "Ivy, look at the postcards," I said, desperate. "These are for you. They're from your father." That brought her to a dead stop. She went rigid. "My father is dead," she said, her voice like stone. "He died before I could form a single memory of him." "No," I said. "He isn't. He is Elliot Vane. He lives in Portland. He sends your mother $50,000 a month to keep that buried." I watched the conflict move across her face. Fear wrestling with curiosity. The name Elliot Vane carried weight. Everyone knew that name by now. I stepped forward and set the postcards on the corner of the desk closest to her. "Just read them," I said. "If I've lost my mind, they're nothing but scribbles. But if I'm right..." She glanced at me, then at the cards. Slowly, reluctantly, she crossed the threshold into the room. She reached out and lifted the top card. Read it. Then the next. then the next. I watched her face fall apart. She knew the handwriting. Maybe she'd come across it on old documents somewhere, or maybe somewhere deep in her bones she simply recognized it. She picked up the bank statement, took in the figures, took in the sender's name. This can't be right. She breathed tears pushing into her eyes. Why would Mom hide this? Why would she lie? Because she is being paid to lie. I said, keeping my voice soft. Because as long as we believe he's dead, she collects the money and I get the basement. Ivy looked up at me. The fear had drained away, replaced by the slow rise of horror. She let the papers fall. Her eyes moved to the open safe, then back to me. She's putting you in a home tomorrow, she said, her voice stripped of color. She signed the paperwork this morning. She told me it was the only way to keep us safe. She said you were dangerous. I am not dangerous, Ivy. I am just a witness. And now so are you. We heard the garage door groan open below us. The deep, throaty rumble of the Mercedes engine. Nadine was home. Panic ignited in Ivy's eyes. She seized my arm. La, she's here. If she finds you in this room, if she sees that safe open, she will destroy me. I finished the thought for her. Or she'll make certain I never get to speak again. Ivy's gaze jumped to the window, then to the back staircase. Go, she whispered. I can't just go, I said. I have no money. I have no way to get to Portland. Ivy didn't pause. She dipped into her purse and pulled out her wallet. Drew out a credit card. It was a black card, a supplementary card tied to Nadine's account. Take it, she said, pressing it into my palm. The PIN is your birthday. Mom used it for my tuition, but she never tracks the small charges. Just go. Run. I looked at my granddaughter. For the first time in 25 years, I saw my own blood running through her. I saw the integrity her father had surrendered long ago. I took the card. I snagged the bank statement and one of the postcards, the one where he wished her a happy 16th birthday. I stuffed them into my pocket. Thank you, I said. Go, she pressed, steering me toward the back door. Go before she gets up here. I scrambled out through the window and onto the trellis just as I caught the sound of Nadine's voice drifting down the hall, calling out for Ivy. I hit the ground hard, my ankles shrieking with pain, but I didn't stop moving. I pushed through the neighbor's hedge and tore down the alleyway, breath clawing in and out of me in ragged bursts. I didn't look back. I had the evidence. I had the means. And for the first time in a long while, I had somewhere to be. I was going to Portland. I was going to introduce myself to Elliot Vane. I ran until the fire in my lungs drowned out the agony in my ankles. The alleyways behind the subdivision were a tangle of overgrown hedges and rotting fence boards, but I knew every turn by heart. I used to walk these same paths with Biscuit, the black Labrador I'd had 15 years ago, before Nadine decided he was too much trouble and had him taken away while I was sitting in the dentist's chair. I hugged the shadows, ducking behind dumpsters every time a pair of headlights swept across the street alongside me. I wasn't just fleeing my house. I was running from a life sentence in a lockdown unit. I reached the interstate bus transit just as the sun began sinking below the horizon, staining the sky in bruises of purple and black. It was a grimy, concrete island of diesel fumes and hollow-eyed strangers. Perfect cover. I dragged my hat down low and moved to the automated kiosk. My fingers hovered above the screen. I punched in a route. Eugene first, then Portland. I didn't want a straight shot. I swiped Ivy's black credit card. The machine hesitated. My breath caught. Approved. The ticket came out with a dry, rasping hiss. I grabbed it and the card my lifeline and climbed onto the first bus heading north. I settled into a seat at the back near the bathroom, where the chemical disinfectant smell was sharp enough to sting my eyes. But it was the only spot where I felt truly out of sight. As the bus rolled onto the highway, I watched the boundaries of my prison dissolve into the dark. I thought I had bought myself some time. I thought I had a head start. I had underestimated Nadine. 3 hours later, the bus swung into a rest stop, a garish oasis of fast food and overpriced fuel glowing against the night. We had a 20-minute layover. I needed coffee. I needed the caffeine to stop my old man's brain from shutting down on me. I kept my head low as I moved through the store. I grabbed a large black coffee and a sandwich. I went to the counter and swiped the card. Declined. The cashier, a teenager with bad skin and a bored, flat expression, sighed. "Try it again, Pops." I swiped again. Declined. My stomach dropped out from under me. Nadine had figured it out. Either Ivy had cracked, or Nadine had caught the account notifications. She had killed the card. I dug around in my pockets, playing at searching for cash I knew I didn't have. "Hey, look at this!" somebody hollered from across the store. I looked up. Bolted high in the corner above the slushy machine was a television locked onto the local 24-hour news channel. A red banner across the bottom screamed, "Silver Alert," and above it, my face. A photo from 10 years back snapped at my retirement party. I looked happy in it. I looked perfectly sane. The anchor's voice cut clean through the store noise. "Police are searching for 71-year-old Gordon Merritt. He has been reported missing by his family. Mr. Merritt suffers from advanced dementia and may be disoriented. Police cautioned that he had a history of violent outbursts and could be a danger to himself and to others. Do not approach. Call 911 immediately." Violent. She had played the violence card. She wasn't looking for a confused old man. She was hunting a fugitive. She had conscripted the entire state into her private search party. I felt eyes landing on me. The cashier was studying the screen, then studying me, his expression sharpening. "Hey, you kind of look like—" I didn't let him get there. I left the coffee. I left the sandwich. I walked out the door at a steady pace, making myself not run. I could feel the heat of their stares burning into my back. I slipped around the side of the building away from the bus. I couldn't board it again. The driver would have seen the alert by now. I was stranded in a parking lot 80 miles from home. No money, no transport, and a face that was now public enemy number one. I crouched behind a stack of wooden pallets near the dumpster, shivering as the night air turned bitter. I had to think. I was a forensic accountant. I solved problems. I found assets where none were supposed to exist. I looked down at my wrist. The Omega Seamaster. I'd bought it for myself in 1997, the year I made partner. It was the one thing of value Nadine had never managed to strip away from me, probably because she assumed it was a knockoff. It was stainless steel, heavy, scratched from years of daily wear, but the movement inside was Swiss perfection, worth $5,000 at minimum. I peered around the edge of the pallets. Across the street, wedged beside a liquor store with iron bars on its windows, a neon sign buzzed and flickered in the dark. "We buy gold pawn." It was a risk. A serious risk. Pawnbrokers talked to cops, but I had no alternative. I drew a long breath, smoothed my filthy shirt as best I could, and crossed the street. The shop reeked of stale smoke and quiet desperation. The man behind the counter was built like a vending machine, thick-necked, shaved head with eyes that priced you out in under a second. He took in my disheveled clothes and wild hair without a word. "I'll help you," he grunted. I unclasped the watch and laid it flat on the glass counter. I need cash. He picked it up and turned it over in his thick hands. He fitted a loop into his eye and bent over it. He looked at the watch, then at me. Nice piece, he said. Stolen. It's mine, I said, keeping my voice level. I have the paperwork at home if you need it, but tonight I need cash. My car broke down, he laughed. A wet hacking sound. Sure it did. Look, old-timer, I don't care where you got it, but without papers, I can't give you market value. Risk tax, how much I asked. 400, my jaw went tight. It's worth 5,000. 400, he repeated, setting the watch on the glass counter. Take it or leave it. I glanced at the security camera in the corner, then at the phone on the wall. He knew I was desperate. He could probably smell it on me. 500, I said, and you don't log it until tomorrow. He narrowed his eyes, turning it over in his mind. Then he dipped into the register and counted out 5 grimy hundreds. Deal. Now get out before I change my mind. I pocketed the cash and walked out feeling lighter and heavier all at once. I had traded my last connection to the life I once built for a bus ticket and a new face. My next stop was the 24-hour pharmacy down the street. I kept my gaze low away from the cameras. I picked up a box of dark brown hair dye, a pair of drugstore reading glasses, and a disposable razor. Paid in cash. Then I found a public restroom in a park a few blocks away. It was grim in there, mirror cracked and mottled. Under a stuttering fluorescent light, I studied my own face. Gordon Merritt, the victim, the senile old man. I pulled off my shirt and worked the dye through my white hair and beard. The chemical bite stung my nostrils. I stood there shivering in the cold for 10 minutes. Then I rinsed it all out over the sink. When I raised my head, a stranger stared back. The hair was jet black, too dark, almost unreal, but it rearranged the whole geometry of my face. I shaved away the beard I had worn for 40 years, leaving my jaw bare for the first time in decades. I slid on the cheap glasses. Gordon Merritt was gone. What stood in his place was a hard-faced man with nothing left to lose. I walked back to the bus station, but I didn't go near the ticket counter. I waited outside by the loading docks until I spotted a driver pulling on a cigarette beside a bus marked Eugene Express. Taking cash passengers? I asked, holding out a $100 bill. He looked at the money, then at the half-empty bus behind him. Machine's broken inside, he said with a wink, folding the bill into his pocket. Sit in the back. Keep your head down. I climbed aboard and made my way to the last row. As the bus swung onto the highway, heading toward the city, where my dead son was erecting skyscrapers, I pressed my hand against the pocket where the evidence sat. Nadine had declared war. She had painted me a monster for the world to see. But she had overlooked one thing. Monsters are made, and she had just finished making me one. I shut my eyes and let the hum of the road carry me toward the reckoning. Eugene was a city of glass and steel climbing out of the gray mist like a monument to human ambition. It was raining when the bus groaned to a stop, a cold, unrelenting drizzle that cut straight through my thin jacket the moment my feet hit the pavement. I had $400 left to my name and a face plastered across every news station in Oregon. But here under the shadow of the Portland sign, nobody gave a second look to a worn-out old man with dyed black hair and cheap glasses. I wasn't Gordon Merritt anymore. I was just another invisible soul in a city that only noticed success. Vane Tower was impossible to overlook. It stabbed into the skyline, a jagged shard of obsidian mirroring the low clouds. The launch gala was that night. Posters covered the construction barricades. A black tie affair for the city's elite. The kind of room where a ticket cost more than my house. I didn't need a ticket. I needed a way in that didn't ask for one. I spent the morning staking out the service entrance. Catering trucks, florists, cleaning crews filing in and out. I trailed a laundry van to a loading dock 3 blocks away. When the driver stepped inside to sign a manifest, I saw my opening. A rack of uniforms hung near the open rear doors. I pulled a gray jumpsuit with a generic facility maintenance logo, a plastic ID badge clipped to the breast pocket. Theft, yes. But I told myself my son owed me considerably more than the price of a polyester uniform. I changed in a public restroom, pulling the jumpsuit on over my clothes. It reeked of industrial detergent and another man's sweat. Near the freight elevator in the tower's parking garage, I found an abandoned janitor cart. I took hold of the handle, kept my head down, moved with the slow, shuffling gait of a man paid by the hour to go unnoticed. The security guard at the service elevator never lifted his eyes from his phone when I muttered maintenance and rolled the cart past him. The elevator ride to the 50th floor was the longest of my life. My heart slammed against my ribs in a frantic rhythm, threatening to crack them apart. When the doors slid open, the sound hit me all at once. The chime of crystal glasses, the murmur of expensive conversation, the quiet swell of a string quartet. The ballroom was a sea of tuxedos and designer gowns. I pushed the cart along the edge of the room, hugging the walleyes moving across every face, and then I found him. He stood at the center of a ring of admirers, holding a champagne flute like a scepter. Elliot Vane, my son. He looked like royalty. His suit fit him the way a second skin fits. He threw his head back, laughing at something a woman in an emerald dress had said. It was the same laugh that used to fill our kitchen on Sunday mornings when I made pancakes. The sound of it buckled my knees. I wanted to rush to him. I wanted to grab him and shake him until something real fell out. I wanted to scream, but I forced my hands to stay on the mop bucket handle. I waited. I watched him for a full hour. Watched him work the investors. Watched him grip the mayor's hand. He was a king in his own castle, and I was the ghost haunting his halls. At last he handed his empty glass to a passing waiter and leaned close to his head of security, a wall of a man with a coil in his ear. The guard stayed at the door while Elliot moved toward the hallway marked VIP restrooms. This was it. I steered my cart into that hallway just as he disappeared through the men's room door. I parked the cart across the entrance, nudging it slightly in the way, and hung a wet floor sign from the handle. One deep breath. Then I pushed inside. The restroom was quiet except for the soft rush of a motion sensor faucet. All marble and gold, opulent enough to pass for a palace. Elliot stood at the mirror, straightening his tie. He caught my reflection as I came in. "We're good in here," he said flatly, not bothering to turn around. "Come back in 10 minutes. I didn't move. I locked the door behind me. The click of the latch bounced off the tile. Elliot frowned into the mirror. I said, "Get out." "Can you not hear?" I kept walking until I was standing directly behind him. I looked into the mirror, into the eyes of the boy I had raised. "Hello, Caleb," I said. He went still. His hands stopped on his tie. He stared at my reflection. The dyed hair and the glasses held him up for a moment. He squinted. Then recognition broke across his face. It didn't arrive with fear. It didn't arrive with shame. It arrived with a cold, flat annoyance, the look of a man who has found a stain on his cuff. He turned around slowly. "You look terrible, Dad," he said. "That hair dye is tragic." The air left my chest. No shock, no apology, just contempt. "You're alive," I whispered, my voice unsteady no matter how hard I fought it. "You let us bury you. You let your mother die of a broken heart, believing you were gone." He sighed and reached for a paper towel to dry his hands. "Hi, Mom had a heart condition, Dad. She was going to die regardless. I just gave her something dramatic to hold on to at the end. The sheer coldness of it hit me like something physical. I stepped back, steadying myself against the sink. Why, I asked. Why did you do it? We loved you. We gave you everything. You gave mediocrity. He spat the word out like a curse. You gave me a small life in a small town with a small future. You wanted me to become you, an accountant, a nobody. I was suffocating in that house. So you killed yourself, I said. You drove your car to the gorge. I parked my car by the gorge, he corrected. I took a bus to Eugene, and I took the $2 million life insurance payout that Nadine collected. It was my seed money. The only thing of any use you ever gave me. The money. It always came back to the money. Nadine knew, I said. She has been with you this whole time. Of course she knew, he said, smoothing his lapel. Nadine is a visionary. She recognized my potential when you couldn't be bothered to. She stayed back to handle the logistics, to keep you in check, to manage the money until I could get Vane Group off the ground. She gave up a great deal for this empire. She tried to put me away. I said, my anger finally breaking through the grief. She tried to have me declared incompetent. She was drugging me. Because you became a liability, he said, his voice going quiet and lethal. You were supposed to just disappear, Gordon. You were supposed to be the tragic widower who quietly lived out his days in the basement. But you had to start poking around. You had to start looking at the books. You became a cost. And now here you are blowing up my IPO launch dressed like someone who sleeps under a bridge. He moved a step closer. He was taller than me now, broader in the shoulders. The boy I'd raised was nowhere in sight. This was something else entirely. You are a monster, I said. I am a billionaire, he shot back. And you are a trespassing janitor. Who do you think anyone is going to believe? He reached into his pocket and drew out his phone. He didn't dial the police. He hit a speed dial. Mike, get in here. We've got a situation in the restroom. Some homeless guy slipped past the perimeter. He's giving me trouble. He hung up and flashed a cold, shark-like smile. You should have stayed in the basement, Dad. The food was free. The door exploded inward. The lock gave way. 2 security guards built like linebackers filled the doorway. They clocked me standing there in my gray jumpsuit. They clocked the billionaire CEO. No questions were needed. Get him out, Elliot barked, and make sure he understands what trespassing costs. I don't want to see his face anywhere near this building again. The first guard grabbed me by the collar. He didn't pull me, he launched me. I hit the marble wall hard, the back of my skull cracking against the stone. White stars burst across my vision. I crumpled to the floor, gasping. Wait! I wheezed, fighting to get upright. He is my son. He is Caleb Merritt. The guard laughed. Sure he is, Pops. And I'm the Queen of England. He drove his boot into my ribs. I felt something give. The pain was blinding, white-hot and instant. I curled in on myself against the cold floor. Get him up, the second guard said. The boss wants him in the alley. They yanked me to my feet. My legs had gone to rubber. Elliot stood watching with his arms folded, inspecting his suit for any trace I might have left on it. He looked at me with pure contempt. Goodbye, Gordon, he said. Do us both a favor and die quietly this time. As the guards dragged me past him, I lunged, a wild, desperate, flailing movement. I grabbed at his jacket. Get your hands off me, you filth! He snapped, slapping my hand away. The guards drove me into the doorframe, then hauled me down the service corridor. But in that single instant of contact, in that last frantic grab, I had done the only thing that counted. My hand had skimmed the inside hem of his jacket. My fingers, stiff and clumsy, had pressed the tiny adhesive bug I'd bought from the pawn shop connection into the lining. a listening device no bigger than a dime. I barely registered the pain as they dragged me to the freight elevator. I barely felt the blows they put into my stomach as we dropped. I hardly noticed the wet pavement when they pitched me out into the back alley, into the rain and the garbage. "Stay down, old man," one of them growled. "Next time we break your legs." The heavy steel door slammed shut behind them. I was alone in the dark, bleeding broken, lying in a puddle of filthy water. My ribs screamed with every breath. My face felt like a balloon. But lying there, staring up at the rain coming down from that black sky, I started to laugh. It was a wet, gurgling sound, but it was laughter. He thought he had won. He thought he'd taken out the trash. But he was walking back into his party wearing a wire. And I was on the other end. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the receiver unit. The red light blinked steady and strong. I fitted the earbud in. The static cleared. I caught the rustle of fabric, then footsteps, and then his voice, crystal clear. "Sorry about that, gentlemen. Just a minor nuisance. Is everything ready for the transfer?" I closed my eyes and listened. The pain was fuel now. He had broken my body, but in doing it, he'd handed me the weapon to destroy him. I was not going to miss. The motel room smelled of stale cigarettes and despair, but it was the only place in Eugene that would take cash with no ID required. I sat on the edge of the mattress, a bag of ice pressed against my ribs, listening to the static hiss in my earbud. My body was a map of bruises, a record of my son's hospitality. But my mind was sharper than it had been in 20 years. The receiver picked up the sound of a car door, then the low hum of a quiet engine. Elliot was on the move. He dialed a number. I held my breath. "It is done," he said, calm, businesslike. The old man crashed the party. Security roughed him up and dumped him in the alley. I heard Nadine's voice on the other end, small and distant through the device. "Is he dead?" "He might be," Elliot replied. "He took a beating, but we can't leave it to chance. If he crawls out of that alley, if he finds a way to get to the press, I need you to call the contractor, the one we used for the union problem last year. Tell him to sweep the alleys within a 5-block radius of the tower. If they turn up a man matching Gordon's description, tell them to finish it. Make it look like a robbery gone wrong." My blood went cold. This wasn't rejection anymore. It was a hit. My son wasn't simply a fraud. He was ordering my death from the back seat of a limousine. I pulled the earbud out. I couldn't stay here. The motel was too close to the tower. If they were sweeping the perimeter, the flophouses would be the first places they checked. I needed help. Real help, not the police who would see a rambling old man with a history of dementia. I needed someone who moved in the same shadows Elliot did. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small leather address book. Worn, the pages yellowed. I hadn't opened it since the day Caleb died. I turned to the letter W. One number written in blue ink. No name, just the number. Clifton Parrish. 20 years ago, Clifton was a sharp attorney with a gambling problem and a habit of dipping into his trust account ledgers. I was the auditor assigned to bury him. I found the discrepancies. I traced the stolen funds. I had everything needed to put him away for a decade in federal prison. But I also discovered that his wife was dying of cancer, and he had been stealing to fund experimental treatments. I made a choice. I buried the evidence. I fixed the books. I saved his life and his career. He swore to me that day, if I ever needed a lifeline, all I had to do was pull the string. I walked to the payphone in the motel parking lot. I dialed. It rang 4 times. Parish Law. A smooth voice answered. "I need to speak to Clifton," I said. "Mr. Parrish is unavailable. May I ask who is calling? Tell him it is the auditor, I said. Tell him the ledger is open. A pause. A click. Then a deep, gravelly voice came on the line. Gordon, is that you? You are supposed to be a ghost. I need to cash in the chip Clifton. Tonight. He didn't ask a single question. He gave me an address in the old historic district, a penthouse. Getting there was a nightmare. I moved through back streets, avoiding any main road, pressing into shadows every time headlights swept past. The pain in my ribs was a constant, screaming companion. When I finally reached the building, the doorman had no intention of letting me through. I looked like a vagrant. But one call upstairs and the heavy iron gates swung open. The elevator opened directly into the apartment, a space of dark wood leather and the scent of expensive scotch. Clifton Parrish was seated in a wingback chair beside the fireplace. He was older now, his hair white, his face deeply lined, but his eyes were as sharp as razor blades. He'd rested on a cane with a silver handle. He looked me over, taking in the dyed hair, the cheap clothes, the bruises spread across my face. You look like hell, Gordon, he said without rising. I feel worse, I answered, limping into the room. He filled a glass with something amber and extended it toward me. I grabbed it and drank my hand unsteady. The liquor traced a warm path through the chill that had taken root inside me. Word reached me that you'd gone off the rails. Clifton said, his gaze never leaving my face. Every news alert says the same thing. Dangerous, senile, missing. There's nothing wrong with my mind, I told him, settling into the chair across from his. The only danger I pose is to the fiction my son has been living. Your son has been dead 25 years, Gordon. I attended that funeral. I stood at the graveside. He wasn't in that box. He fled. He pocketed the insurance payout and erased himself. He became Elliot Vane Clifton, the billionaire. Clifton didn't move. He lowered his glass to the table as though the wrong touch might shatter it. Elliot Vane is your son. I gave one nod. Then I told him all of it. The lentil soup, the broadcast, the scar on his wrist, the confrontation in that restroom, the call he made to have me put in the ground. Clifton sat with it for a long time. When I was done, his eyes fixed on the flames. So he said at last, the righteous Gordon Merritt, the one man who never crossed a line except for one, raised himself a serpent. He tried to have me killed, Clifton. He had his men work me over and dump me in a trash alley. And right now there are people out there hunting me on his orders. I have got nothing left. No wallet, no name, no roof over my head. What is it you're after? Clifton asked. A way out. I can build you a new identity. There is a stretch of coast in Mexico where a man can disappear and stay disappeared. I held his gaze. I let myself picture the ocean. I let myself picture the quiet. Then Ivy came to mind, standing there, clutching those postcards. Then the contempt carved into Elliot's face. No, I said. Running isn't what I want. I want to bring the whole thing down, strip him of everything. The fortune, the name, the image. I want him to know what it feels like to have nothing, the way I did in that alley. Clifton's mouth curved into something that was less a smile than a predator baring its teeth. Now that, he said, is exactly what I was hoping to hear. Because Elliot Vane has had it coming for a long time. The man is arrogant and careless, and he has always believed the rules don't apply to him. He pushed himself upright on his cane. Gordon, you pulled me back from the edge when I had nothing left to stand on. You gave me a future I hadn't earned. I turned that future into wealth and influence, and I did it by studying every buried secret in this city until I knew where each one lay. He moved to a desk in the corner and pressed something. A section of the wall shifted aside, uncovering a row of monitors and humming servers. We don't do this half measures, Clifton said. No running to the precinct with our hat in our hands. Vane's money reaches into that building. Going to the police alone won't touch him. We hit him where it actually hurts. We go straight for his accounts. He fixed his eyes on me, and they were alive with something sharp and hungry. You spent your career tracing money through labyrinths, Gordon. You know exactly how those trails work. And I spent mine finding the places where the law bends furthest before it gives way. Between the two of us, we are going to operate on Elliot Vane right there in the spotlight. He slid a tablet across to me. 3 days until Vane goes public. The IPO is set to be the single largest offering this state has ever seen. If that bell rings, he walks away a multi-billionaire, but tonight he is stretched thin. Every asset he has is tied to propping up that valuation. The screen showed what I expected: shell companies stacked on shadow accounts, stacked on phantom investors. I need to get into the books, I said. Give me access, and I'll find the seams. You'll have it, Clifton said. But not tonight. Tonight, the first order of business is making you look like a human being again. You cannot dismantle a man's empire while you look like you crawled out of a dumpster. He pressed a call button. A figure in a dark suit stepped out of the corridor shadows. Silas, arrange a doctor for Mr. Merritt, then a tailor, and open up the guest suite. We go to war over breakfast. Something loosened in my chest as I settled back into that chair. I hadn't felt it in days, the faint, stubborn pulse of hope. I was no longer doing this alone. I had a wolf in my corner. And the great Elliot Vane didn't have the first idea that the two men with the deepest knowledge of buried sins were closing in on him. I pressed 2 fingers against the bug in my pocket. I'm still listening, Caleb, I murmured to no one. And before long, the whole world will be too. When dawn came to Eugene, it brought no comfort with it. It brought pandemonium. Clifton Parrish occupied his leather chair, tea in one hand and phone in the other, working with the calm of a man diffusing a device. No raised voice, no threats. Just that quiet, steady whisper. A reporter at the Financial Times, a case officer at the Securities and Exchange Commission, a hedge fund manager who jumped at his own reflection. Just something making the rounds. Clifton murmured, his tone smooth as oiled timber. Chatter suggests the feds are circling the Vane purchase of that Panama shell company. Potential laundering, large scale. Whoever is sitting on that stock when the subpoena lands is going to have a very bad week. He ended the call and glanced over at me. The spark is away, Gordon. Let's see what catches. By midday, it had become a banner headline. Vane Group faces federal scrutiny. Allegations of money laundering threaten tech giant's landmark IPO. Every channel looped it. From the guest room of Clifton's penthouse, I stared at the crawl creeping across the bottom of the screen, watching the numbers turn. Vane Group was in free fall. The share price that had been climbing on IPO fever reversed hard. Institutional money was pulling out. The board was in emergency session demanding explanations. I could have watched it all day. For 25 years, my son had constructed his throne on a bedrock of lies. Now I was there to see the ground open up beneath it. He'll move to contain this, Clifton said, coming through the door. Arrogant, yes, but not a fool. He is aware that his ledgers won't survive a real examination, and he knows an SEC deep dive will expose every gap. His instinct will be to shield the asset. What does that look like? I asked. He relocates the cash, Clifton said. That war chest of liquid capital, $200 million, sitting ready for exactly this kind of storm. He'll push it somewhere he believes is out of reach, somewhere offshore that feels safe. And the moment he initiates that transfer, we'll already be there. At 7:00 that evening, we sat in an unmarked van parked across from an establishment called The Vault, the sort of place with no name above the door, and a waiting list measured in seasons. Clifton had a relationship with the proprietor. Clifton had a relationship with everyone. He had secured table 4 in the far back corner, and he had made sure the floral arrangement at the center of that table held a high-fidelity microphone inside it. I was in the rear of the van, with a headset on, watching a grainy feed from a camera Clifton had paid a busboy to clamp to a menu holder near the table. The picture wasn't sharp, but it was enough. Nadine walked in first. She carried herself like someone bracing for impact. Hair yanked back too severely, foundation doing its best and failing against the hollows beneath her eyes. She put away half a double vodka martini before she set the glass back down. Her free hand never stopped fingers drumming an anxious pattern on the linen. Elliot came in 10 minutes behind her. He slipped through the kitchen entrance to dodge the photographers already clustering out front. His color was high jaw, set a film of sweat on his brow. He dropped into the seat opposite Nadine without so much as a word of acknowledgement. "You look absolutely wrecked," he hissed. "Get it together." Nadine put her glass down hard. "Get it together. Have you looked at the coverage? We are hemorrhaging value by the hour. Word is the FBI has opened something. Is that true? Tell me that's not true." "Lower your voice," he cut back, sweeping the room with his eyes, even though it was empty. "This is a hit job, someone trying to crater the offering before it launches. A rival, most likely. Or it's your father," Nadine breathed. Elliot's laugh was a hard, ugly crack. "My father is a senile wreck who got knocked around in an alley somewhere. He's probably in a gutter. Don't insult me by calling this his work. This is a professional move, Nadine. Calculated. Surgical." I sat in the dark of that van and let the cold satisfaction settle over me like a second skin. He still hadn't figured it out. He still had me down as irrelevant. That blindness was going to cost him everything. The waiter materialized at the table. Elliot dismissed him with a gesture. "Here is where we stand," he said, dropping his voice and pulling close. "If regulators lock down our domestic holdings, the offering dies on the table. We lose the ability to service the lenders, and this whole structure collapses. We need to get liquid before anyone can freeze us out." "You're talking about moving the Cayman funds," Nadine said, and something close to panic crossed her face. Every dollar, Elliot said. 200 million tonight. "That kind of movement sets off flags, Elliot." "Not through the blind trust," he replied. "The one we set up in 2009, the Sentinel Trust. It is insulated. We push it through there, then wire the proceeds to the new Switzerland accounts. It will be clean." I glanced at Clifton. That wolfish grin was back on his face. "Sentinel Trust," he murmured. "I set that up for him." And he left the master administrative code sitting right there on the screen. Elliot produced a tablet. He pulled up a secure banking application. "I'm initiating the transfer now," he said. "I need your authorization code, Nadine." "You're the co-signatory." Nadine hesitated. "Are you sure this is the right call?" "Do you want to end up in prison?" Elliot asked, his voice laced with quiet venom. "Because if they freeze those assets and start tracing the source, we are both looking at a very long stretch behind bars. Give me the code." Nadine dug through her purse. She produced a small digital token, pressed the button, and read the number aloud. 639. Elliot keyed it in. Then he pressed his thumb to the screen. "Done," he said, releasing a slow breath. "The money is moving. By tomorrow morning, it'll be sitting in Zurich. Untouchable." He leaned back, radiating satisfaction. "Let them investigate. Let the stock crater. We have the war chest. Once the panic settles, we can buy the company back for pennies on the dollar. Yeah, we win, Nadine. We always win." I pulled off the headset. My hands were trembling, not from fear, from pure adrenaline. Did you get it? Clifton was already hammering at his laptop, hardwired into the van's satellite uplink. Got it, he said. Sentinel Trust. I'm in the back end now. I can see the pending transaction. $200 million. He looked up at me, eyes bright in the dim interior of the van. They think it's heading to Switzerland, Gordon, but I can redirect it. I can swap the routing number before the clearinghouse runs the batch at midnight. Where do we send it? I asked. Clifton paused, fingers suspended above the keys. We could keep it, he said quietly. 200 million. We could vanish. We could live like kings. I stared at the feed. I watched my son, the man who had ordered my death, raise a glass to his own cleverness. I saw the woman who had tried to hollow out my mind. I thought about the cold lentil soup in the basement. I thought about all those years of grief. No, I said. I don't want his money. It's blood money. I want him to know it's gone. I want him to watch it disappear. Clifton nodded slowly. Then where? The Children's Hospital, I said. Doernbecher Children's Hospital, the one that treats kids with no insurance. Kids who get stitched up by their fathers because a doctor is out of the question. Clifton smiled, a real smile this time. A charitable donation, he said. Anonymous, of course. Of course, I agreed. He ran through a sequence of commands. He bypassed the Swiss routing. He pulled up the donation portal for the hospital foundation, entered the amount $200 million, and clicked. It's done. Clifton said the funds were in escrow. At midnight, they'd hit the hospital account. 5 minutes after that, Elliot would get the notification. On the feed, I watched Elliot glance at his watch. He signaled for the check. We should head to the gala, he told Nadine. We need to show our face, let them see we're not rattled. He rose and buttoned his jacket. He looked powerful. He looked untouchable. He had no idea he was already a dead man walking. He's heading into his own funeral, I whispered. Clifton shut the laptop. Let's go get changed, Gordon. You've got a gala to crash, and this time you're going in through the front door. We climbed out of the van into the cool night air. The rain had stopped. City lights shimmered across the slick pavement. A strange lightness opened up in my chest. The fear had lifted. The grief had lifted. What remained was only the cold, hard certainty of the end. My son had set a trap for me 25 years ago. Tonight I had just sprung mine. And when the steel jaws snapped shut, he wouldn't even see them coming. The rain in Eugene does not wash things clean, it just makes the grime slicker. I stood beneath the awning of a coffee shop in the Pearl District, watching the foot traffic pass. The dye in my hair had started to itch, and the bruises across my ribs pulsed in rhythm with the bass from a passing car. But I stood straight. I was no longer the man who hid in a basement. I was a man who had just redirected $200 million, and I was about to pull my own granddaughter into the middle of it. Clifton had arranged the meeting. He'd dispatched a courier to the hospital where Ivy worked, carrying a note that read simply, "The truth is in the basement." She would know what that meant. She would remember the safe. She arrived 10 minutes late, glancing back over her shoulder. She had on a raincoat and the look of someone who hadn't slept in days. She didn't embrace me. She stopped 3 feet back, her hands buried in her pockets, as if getting too close might be dangerous. "Grandpa," she whispered, her voice nearly lost under the rain. "Mom says you're sick. She says you attacked a security guard. She says the police are looking for you because you're a danger to yourself." I studied her face. The conflict was right there in her eyes. She wanted to believe her mother because believing her mother meant the world still made sense. Believing me meant her entire life had been built on a lie. Your mother says a great many things, Ivy. Ivy, I said, keeping my voice even. She said your father was dead. She said I was senile. She said she loved us. Ivy flinched. That's different. Elliot, he explained it to me. He said he had to disappear to protect us. He said he was in trouble with dangerous people and that faking his death was the only way to keep us safe. I nearly laughed. It was such a textbook lie. A swashbuckling hero cover story stretched over naked, cowardly greed. He lied, Ivy. He left because he wanted the insurance payout. He left because he was done being a father and a son. He wanted to be a king, and kings don't carry baggage. I reached into my jacket and drew out a thick manila envelope. Clifton had put it together that morning. This was the nail in the coffin. You think I'm the delusional one, I said, holding it toward her. You think I'm the one who needs to be locked away? Read this. She hesitated. Read it? I said softly but firm. She took the envelope. Her fingers shook. She drew out the pages. The first was a photocopy of an admission form for Quiet Pines long-term care facility. It was dated 3 months back. Look at the date, I said. She stared at it. 3 months ago. But Mom said she only decided to move you last week after you started hallucinating. She signed that contract 90 days ago, Ivy. She paid the deposit. This wasn't a response to it was a scheduled eviction. She was just waiting for the right moment to pull the trigger. Ivy turned the page. It was a copy of a conservatorship petition listing Nadine Merritt as the sole guardian of my estate. Below that was a draft property sale agreement. My house. My land. She was selling the house, she whispered. She was liquidating me, I corrected. But keep reading. The last page is the one that matters. It was a trust fund amendment. The Elliott Vane Family Trust. It laid out the distribution of assets upon the event of an IPO. Ivy read it. Her eyes went wide. She read it again. I'm not in it, she said, her voice unsteady. My name isn't here. No, I said. It isn't. The named beneficiaries were Elliott Vane and Nadine Merritt. No provision for children, no college fund, no inheritance. But Mom said she told me that once the company went public, we'd all be taken care of. She said I could leave the hospital. She said I could buy a house. She lied. I said, and I didn't soften it. You are not a beneficiary, Ivy. You are a line item, an expense, just like me. Just like Derek was before your father pushed him. She looked up at me. Tears were cutting through the rain on her cheeks. Derek, she asked. Who is Derek? Your uncle, I said. The one they never told you about. The one your father killed to finance the first chapter of his new life. I walked her through it, the gorge, the confrontation, the push. I didn't embellish. I didn't dramatize. I laid out the cold, hard facts exactly as they'd been handed to me. They are monsters, Ivy. They use people. They used me. They used your grandmother. And now they are using you. She let the papers fall. They drifted across the wet pavement, soaking up the grime. She pressed both hands over her face and broke down. It was the sound of pure heartbreak. The sound of a child finally understanding that the monsters under the bed had been sleeping in the master bedroom all along. Why? She choked out. Why are you telling me this? What you are about to hear is the moment everything hung in the balance, where one wrong step meant losing not just the fight, but everything I had left to fight for. Before we get there, tell me this: if someone you loved had been quietly working against you for years, Would you confront them the moment you knew? Or would you wait and build your case in silence? Because I intend to bring them down. Everything they have, the money, the good name, the freedom to walking around like they own the world, I'm stripping it all away. Vane Group is going to ash. She stared at me like I'd lost my mind. You can't do this. Their power is too deep. Dad has armed men around him. Mom has a team of attorneys on retainer. I have the truth, I told her. And I have you. Me. She took a step back, shaking her head. I can't, Grandpa. I can't be the one to stand against them. If I cross them, Mom made it clear if I helped you, we'd be out on the pavement with nothing. She said you'd drag us all under. We're already under Ivy. Right now, the only real question is whether you come out of this as someone who fought back, or someone who just let it happen to them. I closed the distance between us and held her eyes. There's one thing I'm asking of you. One thing only, and once it's done, you walk. You go home, you pick up where you left off, and you never have to think about any of this again. What is it? She barely got the words out. From my jacket pocket, I produced a small black USB drive. Clifton's tech contact had loaded it with a keylogger military-level code completely undetectable. Tonight is the gala. Nadine will be there. She'll have her phone out all evening, tracking the accounts, overseeing the movement of the money they believe they've already gotten away with. All I need is 30 seconds with that phone. Tell her your battery's dead. Tell her you need to fire off a quick message. The excuse doesn't matter to me. Just make the connection happen. But why, she asked, turning the black drive over in her palm. I need her authentication codes. That was the lie I gave her. What I kept back was that the money was long gone. What I kept back was that the keylogger had nothing to do with codes. Its real target was the cloud backup your father uses to store the security footage from 25 years ago. The footage that Clifton had managed to trace but couldn't crack without a live link to the source device. The footage of what really happened the night of the accident. Get those codes, and I can expose the fraud, I told her. I can show the world they robbed me, and I can watch them get handcuffed. She studied the drive. She looked at the papers. The rain was dissolving into pulp. She was thinking about a father whose face she'd never seen clearly, and a mother who had always treated her like an expense to be trimmed. Then she reached out. Her fingers were cold, but when they closed around the drive, they held on hard. 30 seconds, she said. That's the whole job. She tucked the drive away and used the back of her hand to scrub her face, dragging mascara halfway down her cheek. Standing there in the rain, she looked less like a scared girl and more like someone who had just made their first real decision. Mom's going in an emerald dress tonight, she said, no emotion at all in her voice. She picked it up with the cash from pawning off your car. Something sharp twisted behind my ribs. Naturally, I said. No, I'll do it, Ivy told me. Not for any inheritance, not to keep the house. She did it because yesterday, Nadine looked her straight in the face and said you never cared about me. Said you couldn't even remember my name. I wrapped my hand around hers. Your name has never left me, Ivy. Through every day in that basement, you were what I held on to keep from going under. She pressed my hand once. Then she released it, turned, and walked back into the downpour, moving toward the life that was hours away from blowing apart. I stood there watching until she was gone. Something leaden settled in behind my ribs. I had used my own granddaughter as a tool, pointed her at her own mother and father like a loaded weapon. It sat badly. But when I bent down and peeled the waterlogged Quiet Pines intake form off the ground and crushed it in my hand, I understood there was no other way. Wars don't leave you with clean hands. Tonight at that gala, Eugene's streets were about to be flooded with the truth. I flipped my collar up against the rain and walked back to the penthouse. Time to get into the tuxedo. The one Clifton Parrish had ordered for me hung like a second skin, a suit of armor in midnight blue bespoke silk, worth more than what Nadine had pulled from selling my car to fund her emerald dress. From the mezzanine shadows, I looked down over the grand ballroom of Vane Tower, working my cufflinks into place. Gold stamped with my initials GM. Gordon Merritt, a name my son had spent 25 years entombing under concrete and carefully constructed lies. He was about to watch it crawl back out. Down on the floor, the evening was at full roar. The excess was revolting. Chandeliers big as compact cars blazed overhead, showering light over Eugene's wealthiest faces. Ice sculptures gleamed beside champagne fountains, and every table buckled under the weight of caviar and truffles. 500 people were in that room, saluting a man who had killed his brother and left his own parents for dead. They raised their glasses. They cheered. They circled him like he was royalty. Elliot Vane commanded the stage under a spotlight so intense it almost made him look like something holy. One hand gripped the microphone, the other was draped around Nadine's waist like she was a possession. She had the emerald dress on exactly as Ivy had warned me. Strapless, form-fitting, the kind of cut designed to remind a room who she was, and all of it paid for with money she'd bled out of me. That polished, luminous smile of hers swept across the investors and the politicians who'd built a wall around the two of them. I pressed the tip of my finger against the earpiece nested in my canal. "Clifton, are we set?" His voice came back out of the control van 3 blocks over, clean and unhurried. "All green, Gordon." The keylogger Ivy planted cracked open the back door to his private cloud. "You called it." He never wiped it. Kept a full digital copy of the security footage from that gas station camera near the gorge. Saved it like a souvenir. Something to admire when he wanted to feel brilliant. "We're through the ballroom's AV. Every screen is ours. Every speaker is ours. Just give me the word." My gaze dropped to my son below. He lifted his glass. The room hushed on cue. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he said, his voice carrying easily through the high-end sound rig. "This evening isn't simply about a tower. It's about what a name can become. It's about building something from nothing at all. I arrived in this city 25 years ago with empty pockets and a single idea. I left a painful chapter behind me. I lost people I loved. But I came to understand that your past only controls you if you let it. So you put it in the ground and you raise something better over it." The room approved with a warm rumble. He had the act perfected, the self-made man, rough edges, sanded, smooth, humble despite the billions. Then he turned to face Nadine. None of it would have been possible without the woman beside me. "Nadine, you were solid ground when everything else was shifting. You never stopped believing in me." He kissed her right there on the stage. Cameras strobed. A portrait of everything the dream is supposed to look like. That's when I breathed it out. "Burn it down." The ballroom lights stuttered. Once. Twice. Then the whole room went black, a complete and total darkness. The gasp that rolled through the crowd was immediate, then dissolved into scattered, uneasy laughter. Elliot's voice came through the dark, strained, but holding it together. "Technical issue, everyone, nothing serious. We've got a load problem with the stage power. Bear with us." But nothing came back on. What came on instead was the giant LED screen at the rear of the stage, the same one that had spent the night showing Vane Group's sky-climbing stock figures. No charts now. No company logo. Just a timestamp burned white against black. October 14th, 1998, 11:42 p.m. The recording was old, dim shot in black and white from a fixed security camera. But there was no mistaking what it captured. A gorge. That gorge. The Lover's Lane outside our old town. A car nosed into frame my car, the one investigators told me had simply drifted off the road. It rolled to a stop. The driver's door opened and a young man came out. Even through the static and grain, you could read the body language. It was Caleb. A quarter-century younger, but unmistakably him. He came around to the far side and opened the passenger door. A woman stepped out. Nadine. The ballroom went absolutely still. The kind of stillness that isn't peaceful, it has weight to it, like the pressure drop before a storm breaks. On screen, young Caleb and young Nadine moved together to the rear of the car. There was nothing mournful in how they carried themselves, nothing broken. These were not two people in shock or grief. They were grinning. Nadine pulled out a cigarette and lit it. Caleb propped himself against the trunk and kissed her. After that, they were efficient. Car shifted to neutral. Both of them lined up at the bumper. They leaned in and shoved. The car crept forward slowly at first, then faster as the ground fell away. When it tipped over the ledge and the darkness swallowed it whole, Caleb thrust both fists into the air. He grabbed Nadine and swung her off her feet. Then the two of them walked away together, fingers laced until the night closed around them. The image locked there on that last frame, the timestamp pulsing. 10 full seconds, not a breath in the room. The collision between what they knew about the man at that microphone and what their eyes were showing them was almost visible. You could feel it pressing against the air. And then the noise started. A murmur, at first low and disbelieving, climbing fast into something that shook the walls. "What is this?" Elliot screamed, his voice splintering. "Kill the feed. Cut it now. Security." He flailed his arms toward the sound booth at the rear of the room. The technicians couldn't do a thing. Clifton had locked them out. The screen sat frozen, a towering, luminous accusation. Nadine pulled away from him, stumbling backward, both hands pressed over her mouth. She looked from the screen to the crowd, her eyes wide with something close to panic. She understood exactly what that footage meant. It meant the statute of limitations might have run out on the fraud, but public opinion carries no expiration date. "It's a deep fake!" Elliot shrieked into the microphone, every trace of composure gone. "AI generated. Someone is hacking this event. This is corporate sabotage. Don't believe what you are seeing." He was desperate, visibly sweating under the emergency lights that had just kicked in. He looked like a cornered animal. "Clifton," I said. "Cut his mic." The sound of Elliot's shouts vanished in an instant. He was mouthing words, screaming into a dead microphone, but nothing came through. He slapped the mic repeatedly. His eyes swung wildly around the room. Then I spoke. I had a headset microphone synced to the ballroom's audio system. My voice, deep and gravelly, rolled out of every speaker in the hall, swallowing the chaos whole. "It's not a deep fake, Caleb." The sound of my voice landed on him like a physical blow. He went rigid. He stopped hitting the mic. He looked up, searching the darkness of the balcony, scanning the crowd. He recognized that voice. It was the voice that had read him bedtime stories. The voice that had taught him to ride a bike. "Who is that?" he cried, his voice thin without amplification. "Who is doing this?" I stepped out of the shadows of the mezzanine and moved down the grand staircase. The spotlight operator, running on instinct, swung the beam from the stage over to me. I emerged in a circle of white light, the tuxedo, the dark hair, the face of a man who had come back from the dead. "Hello, son," I said, my voice carrying through the hall. The crowd turned. 500 heads swiveled in my direction. The path from the staircase to the stage cleared in seconds. People drew back, opening a wide aisle flanked by stunned faces. I walked slowly. I didn't limp. I pushed through the pain in my ribs. I moved with the authority of a judge crossing into his own courtroom. Elliot stared at me. The color drained from his face, a pasty, bleached white. He looked like a man confronted by a ghost. "Gordon," he whispered. The word was unamplified, but in the dead silence of the room, everyone heard it. I reached the foot of the stairs and stepped out onto the main floor. I kept walking, my gaze locked on his. "You missed a spot, Caleb," I said, my voice booming out. "You thought you buried the past. You thought you threw me away in that alley like a bag of garbage. But you forgot one thing. Garbage doesn't have a memory. A father does." Nadine let out a sob. "It's him!" she shrieked. "Oh my God, Elliot, it's him!" She seized Elliot's arm, driving her nails into his expensive suit. "Do something! Get him out of here!" Elliot shook her off. He was shaking. His eyes raked across the room, hunting for his security team, hunting for an exit, hunting for some angle to spin this. But there was no angle. The video was still frozen behind him. The likeness between the boy on that screen and the man standing on stage was impossible to deny. And the likeness between the man on stage and the older man walking toward him was equally impossible to deny. "Security!" Elliot roared, finding his voice again. "Get this man out of here. He is mentally unstable. He is a stalker." The two guards from the alley, the very ones who had cracked my ribs, began moving toward me from the side of the stage. They looked uncertain. This was no longer a homeless man in a jumpsuit. This was a man in a tuxedo who owned the room. "I wouldn't do that, gentlemen," I said calmly, not breaking stride. As they stepped onto the floor, the main doors at the back of the ballroom exploded open. Federal agents, nobody move. A dozen agents in FBI windbreakers poured in with weapons drawn. They spread out, locking down the exits, cutting off the stage. The crowd screamed and scattered. The security guards froze, hands going up. I didn't stop walking. I walked straight to the edge of the stage. I was 5 feet from my son. I could see the sweat beading on his upper lip. I could see the terror in his eyes. "You told them I was dead," I said. "You told them I was senile. You told them I was dangerous." I climbed the steps to the stage. Elliot backed up until the podium stopped him. Nadine was cowering behind him, weeping into her hands. "But here I am," I said, standing beside him. "I am alive. I am sane. And I am the most dangerous thing you have ever faced because I know exactly who you are." I turned to the crowd. The FBI agents held their positions, letting this play out. Clifton had arranged that as well. He'd handed them the bigger fish, the money laundering evidence, on the condition that I got my moment. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said into my headset, "the man you know as Elliot Vane does not exist. He is a fiction, a ghost story invented by a coward who killed his own brother and abandoned his parents for an insurance check." Murmurs of shock moved through the room like a wave. "His name is Caleb Merritt," I continued. "And 25 years ago he pushed his brother Derek off a cliff because he wanted more. And 3 days ago he tried to do the same thing to me." "Lies!" Elliot screamed, lunging at me. "It's all lies. He's insane." He grabbed for my throat. But he was slow, and he was desperate. I didn't even have to hit him. I simply stepped aside. He lurched forward, crashing hard into the podium. The FBI agents closed in. "Caleb Merritt, put your hands behind your back." Elliot scrambled upright, looking unhinged. "My name is Elliot Vane. I am a billionaire. You cannot touch me. I have lawyers. I have money." I looked at him. I smiled, a cold, hard smile. "About that money," I said. I pointed to the screen. The image of the car disappeared, replaced by a bank transaction log. It showed a transfer. Sentinel Trust to Dornbecker Children's Hospital. Amount $200 million. Status completed. Elliot stared at the screen. He blinked. He read it again. "What is this?" he whispered. "Where is my money?" "It's gone," I said. "I donated it, in memory of Derek Merritt." "No," he wailed. "No, no, no. That is my money. That is everything." "It was never yours," I said. "It was stolen, and now it's doing some good." He dropped to his knees. He stared at his hands, then up at me. The arrogance had evaporated. The king was finished. All that remained was a greedy little boy who had lost his toy. Nadine let out a high, piercing scream as an agent snapped cuffs onto her wrists. "You did this?" She spat as they pulled her past me. "You ruined everything." "I didn't ruin anything, Nadine," I said. "I just turned on the lights." Elliot looked up at me as they hauled him to his feet. Tears were running down his face, cutting through the sweat. "Dad," he pleaded. "Dad, please tell them. Tell them it's a mistake. I am your son." I looked at him. I looked at the scar on his chin, the one I had stitched closed with my own hands. I felt a stab of grief for the boy he had once been, but it was swiftly buried under the memory of the cold soup, the basement, and the order to have me killed. My son died 25 years ago. I said, my voice flat. "You are just a stranger wearing his face. The agents took him away." The crowd watched in stunned silence. I stood alone on the stage beneath the spotlight. I removed the earpiece. I drew a long breath. My ribs ached, but for the first time in a very long time, I could actually breathe. The silence in the ballroom was broken by a sound that made my skin crawl: laughter. A dry, hacking laugh that started somewhere low in Elliot's chest and built until it rang off the vaulted ceiling. He pulled himself up from the floor, wiping the blood from his lip with a silk handkerchief that cost more than my monthly pension. He straightened his jacket, smoothed his hair back into place, and turned to the crowd with a manic gleam in his eyes. He raised a trembling finger at the frozen image of the young man sending the car over the cliff. "Is that it?" He sneered, his voice clawing back some of its old arrogance. "Is that your smoking gun, Gordon? A grainy tape from 1998. You are pathetic. You really are just a senile old man who doesn't understand how the world works." He turned to the FBI agents holding their position near the stage. "Officers, do you know what the statute of limitations is for insurance fraud in this state? It's 7 years. Do you know what the statute is for wrongful death or manslaughter when there's no body and no forensic evidence? It's complicated. But after 25 years, good luck getting a jury to convict a billionaire pillar of the community on a blurry videotape pulled from a hacked server." He moved to the edge of the stage and spread his arms wide, playing to the room like a preacher at his pulpit. "This is history," he shouted. "Ancient history. Even if that's me on that screen and I'm not saying it is, you cannot touch me. I am Elliot Vane. I built this city. Half the people in this room work for me. You think a ghost story is going to take me down?" He swung back toward me, his eyes burning with contempt. "You missed your window, Dad. You should have stayed dead. You can't prosecute me. I am untouchable." Nadine got to her feet, smoothing out her dress. She saw the confidence flooding back into her husband, and she grabbed onto it like a rope thrown to a drowning woman. She leveled a finger at me. "He's right," she shrieked. "This is slander. We are going to sue you for everything you have. We will drown you in legal bills until you die in whatever gutter you crawled out of." For a moment, the crowd shifted. I could see the doubt moving across their faces. Money has its own gravity. People are drawn to it. They want to believe that the man holding the checkbook is beyond reach. Elliot saw it happening too. He smiled, the smile of a man who believes he just bluffed his way back from the gallows. "You're right, Caleb," I said, my voice steady, carried by the speakers. "The statute of limitations on the fraud has run out. With the right legal team, you might even beat the murder charge. You are very skilled at bending the law to your will." I reached into the inside pocket of my tuxedo. Elliot flinched. He thought I was going for a weapon. But all I pulled out was a thin tablet. "But I'm not a lawyer," I said. "I'm a forensic accountant, and while the law has deadlines, money doesn't. Money leaves a trail. It leaves footprints in the snow. And you left a very muddy path." I tapped the tablet screen. The image on the massive wall behind me changed. The footage of the car going over the cliff disappeared. In its place, a dense diagram filled the screen, a spiderweb of lines and boxes with a single black box at the center labeled Sentinel Trust. Elliot stopped smiling. He squinted at the screen. "Now, you thought you were being clever running your money through Sentinel Trust," I said, moving closer. "A blind trust registered in the Cook Islands with no named beneficiaries, only a bearer bond structure. The perfect vehicle for laundering money. Cash flows in, cash flows out, and no one can trace who's holding the wheel. That is private financial data," Elliot stammered. "Showing that is illegal. It would be illegal," I cut in, "if I didn't own it." The room went utterly silent. Elliot stared at me, his face twisting with confusion. "What are you talking about?" he whispered. "You made a mistake, son," I said. "A technical one. When you set up the Sentinel Trust 20 years ago, you placed a shell company in the trustee role to bury your identity under another layer, a company called Blue Horizon Holdings. You forgot to pay the renewal fees on the business registration 3 months ago. It went dormant." I took a step toward him, savoring the way he drew back. "My friend Clifton Parrish found that dormant registration yesterday morning. He bought the shell company for $500. And because I now own the company serving as trustee for your fund, I have full legal administrative access to every asset held inside it." I swiped the tablet screen. A bank statement filled the wall, the Cayman Islands account, the one he'd just moved his war chest into. The balance glowed in bright green numbers. $200 million. "You tried to move your liquid assets tonight. You thought you were tucking them away in a Swiss vault. But because I control the trustee, I control the routing. You didn't send that money to yourself, Caleb. You sent it to me." "No," he gasped. "That's impossible. You can't do that." "I just did," I said. I tapped the screen one more time. A transfer authorization window appeared, projected 20 feet high for every person in the room to read. Sender, Sentinel Trust. Recipient, Doernbecher Children's Hospital Foundation. Amount $200 million. Memo, in memory of the man you used to be. Elliot lunged at me. The sound that came out of him was pure animalistic loss. He didn't care about the murder charge. He didn't care about the fraud. But this was his money. This was his God. "Don't you do it!" he roared, clawing at the air. I pressed the button. Execute. On the big screen, a loading bar appeared. It filled in under a second. A green check mark flashed. Transfer complete. A collective gasp swept through the room. $200 million had just vanished from the accounts of Elliot Vane. "Your phone, Caleb," I said. "Check your phone." He dug in his pocket with trembling hands, dropping the device twice before he got hold of it. He picked it up. He stared at the screen. The notification was there. The balance alert. 0. "It's gone," he whispered. It's all gone. Not just that, I said. I'm not finished. Since I own the trustee company, I also have access to the liability clauses. Did you know the Sentinel Trust carries a clawback provision for debt coverage? I swiped the tablet again. A list of his creditors filled the screen, the banks that financed the tower, the private lenders, the construction unions. I just triggered the default clauses. Every loan you carry is now due immediately. The tower isn't yours. The penthouse isn't yours. The car waiting out front isn't yours. Even the suit on your back technically belongs to the creditors now. Nadine collapsed to her knees. She grabbed at the hem of my trousers. Gordon, please, she sobbed. We have nothing. We'll be on the street. You cannot leave us with nothing. You left me with cold soup and a basement, Nadine, I said, looking down at her without pity. You left me with a cut phone line and a bottle of pills. You wanted me to have nothing. I'm just returning the favor. Elliot was staring at his phone, jabbing at the screen, as though he could reverse the numbers by force of will. I am Elliot Vane, he muttered. I am a billionaire. This is a glitch. This is a mistake. There is no Elliot Vane, I said. He was a fiction purchased with stolen money, and now the check has bounced. The FBI agent in charge stepped forward. He had been patient. He had let me strip the armor from the king before moving in for the kill. Caleb Merritt, you are under arrest for federal wire fraud, money laundering, and the murder of Derek Merritt. Nadine Merritt, you are under arrest for conspiracy and insurance fraud. Agents closed in, seizing Elliot by both arms. He didn't resist. He went limp. His gaze drifted to the screen where his balance read 0. He looked diminished, without the money, without the arrogance. He was just a middle-aged man who had spent his life running from himself. Wait, he said as they cuffed him. Wait, Dad. He looked at me. It was the first time in 25 years that he'd looked at me with anything other than contempt. Dad, fix it. You can fix it. You're an accountant. You can reverse the transfer. Please, I'll give you anything. I'll give you the house. I'll give you a room upstairs. Just get the money back. I looked at him. I saw the 10-year-old boy who wept when he fell off his bike. But that boy was gone. What stood in front of me was a hollow shell. No, I cannot fix you, Caleb, I said, my voice breaking. I spent 25 years grieving for you. I cried for you every single day. I told myself I should have been a better father. I should have given you more. But I understand now that nothing I gave you would ever have been enough. There is a hole inside you that no amount of money can fill. I turned my back on him. Take him away, I told the agents. No! Nadine screamed as they dragged her from the stage. She kicked and spat, her emerald dress riding up around her legs. You old fool. You ruined us. I hope you die alone. I watched them go. I watched them get hauled through the crowd of people who had applauded them not an hour before. Nobody stepped forward to help. Nobody offered a lawyer. The crowd drew back like the parting of the Red Sea, recoiling from the stench of ruin. I stood alone on the stage. The screen behind me still held the 0 balance like a verdict carved in stone. The room was hushed, cut through only by murmurs of shock. Then I felt a hand settle on my shoulder. I turned. It was Clifton Parrish. He'd come up from the control van. He was smiling, but the sadness behind his eyes was plain. It's done, Gordon, he said quietly. They're gone. I looked down at my hands. They were steady. The trembling had stopped. Is it over? I asked. Clifton nodded. The money is with the hospital. The evidence is with the FBI. The tower will go into receivership by morning. They have nothing left to fight with. I looked out across the sea of faces. I spotted Ivy near the exit. She was crying, but she was standing tall. She gave me a nod, a quiet, private acknowledgement. We had made it through. I lifted the microphone from my head and set it on the podium. "Let's go, Clifton," I said. "I want a hamburger, a real one with salt." We walked off the stage together, leaving the hollowed-out ruins of Elliot Vane's empire behind us. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The past was finally buried, and this time it would stay that way. The silence in the ballroom was cut by the wail of sirens somewhere in the distance, drawing closer with every beat. But the real storm was already inside. I stood on the stage, the digital receipt of the $200 million donation still glowing on the massive screen behind me like a tombstone for Vane Group. The zero balance on Elliot's phone was not just a number. It was the collapse of his entire world. The doors at the back of the room burst open again. This time it wasn't one voice. It was a raid. Federal agents in tactical gear poured in, moving with the blunt, heavy precision of a sledgehammer. They had no interest in the champagne or the caviar. They fanned out, locking down the perimeter, their eyes fixed on the man kneeling on the stage. "FBI, nobody move." The command bounced off the crystal chandeliers. The crowd, the elite of the city, who had been sipping champagne mere minutes before, scattered like roaches when the lights snap on. They pressed against the walls, desperate to put distance between themselves and the radioactive fallout of Elliot Vane. Caleb didn't run. He couldn't. He was still staring at his phone, his mind incapable of processing the scale of what had been taken from him. He was catatonic, frozen in the rubble of his own greed. But Nadine was not catatonic. She was vibrating. The shock of the empty account had burned off, replaced by something primal and animal. She looked at Caleb, the man she had conspired with, lied for, sold herself to, and saw him kneeling there broken and penniless. Something inside her snapped. The mask of the devoted wife, the polished and elegant partner, shattered into jagged pieces. "You promised me!" she screamed. The sound was so raw it made the agents pause mid-stride. She threw herself at him. She bore no resemblance to a socialite in an emerald dress anymore. She looked like a fury. She tackled him, her nails raking across his face, going for his eyes. "You told me it was safe. You told me he was nothing. You lost it all." She was clawing and hitting him, screaming obscenities that would have made a sailor flinch. It was ugly. It was the sound of rats turning on each other aboard a sinking ship. Caleb threw his arms up to shield his face, flailing weakly. "Get off me!" he yelled, his voice cracking. "It's your fault you spent it. You wanted the penthouse." An agent swarmed in and pulled Nadine off by the waist. She kicked and spat her heels, scraping against the polished stage floor. Her dress tore. Her hair was a wild mane. She jabbed a shaking finger at him as they dragged her back. Now he killed Derek. She shrieked, pivoting fast, desperate to trade anyone for her own survival. "He told me he did it. I have the journals. I wrote it all down. I am a witness. I want a deal." Caleb stared at her, blood rising in deep scratches along his cheek. His eyes were wide with raw betrayal. The alliance of 25 years, the bond forged in blood and money, had come apart in 30 seconds. "You witch!" he spat. "You were there. You pushed the car." The agent slammed him to the floor, cuffing his hands behind his back. The metal clicked. The sound of finality. "Caleb Merritt, you are under arrest for money laundering, wire fraud, and the murder of Derek Merritt." He struggled under the agent's weight, turning his head sideways, cheek pressed against the floorboards. His eyes found me. I hadn't moved. I was standing 5 feet away watching the demolition of my family. "Dad!" he screamed. The word hit me square in the chest. Dad. He hadn't called me that since he was 20, since before the gorge, since before he became Elliot. Dad, help me look at what they're doing to me. The agents hauled him to his knees. He was weeping now, blood and tears and snot smearing across his face. The arrogance was gone. The billionaire was gone. What remained was a terrified child who had broken something irreparable and wanted his father to make it right. I didn't mean for it to happen. It got out of control. I can fix this. I can earn it back. You have to help me. You are my father. He shuffled forward on his knees, straining against the agent's grip. Please, Dad. I am your son. I am Caleb. Remember the fishing trip. Remember the bike, don't let them take me. I will die in there. He looked up at me with such desperate hope. He genuinely believed that after everything, the theft, the lies, the order to have me killed, the bond of blood, was a get-out-of-jail-free card. He thought he could reach the sentimental old man he'd locked in the basement. I looked down at him. I saw the scar on his chin. I remembered stitching it closed. I remembered holding him when he cried. I remembered the pride swelling in my chest the day he graduated. But then I remembered the cold soup. I remembered the look in his eyes in the bathroom mirror when he gave the order to break my ribs. I remembered the voice recording of him planning to have me killed. A tear rolled down my cheek. I let it go. It was the last one I would ever spend on him. I met his eyes. The room held its breath. Even Nadine had gone quiet to listen. You are mistaken, I said. My voice was low, but it reached the back of the room. My son is not here. Caleb froze. His mouth fell open, but nothing came out. My son was a good man. I went on, my voice hardening into something like steel. He had a heart. He loved his family. But he died 25 years ago. I buried him. I mourned him. I loved him. I leaned down close enough that only he could see the absolute finality in my eyes. You are just a stranger who stole a dead man's face to hide his crimes, and I do not know you. I straightened up and looked at the agents. Get him out of my sight. No, Caleb wailed. Pure desolation. Dad, no. The agents dragged him away. He dug his heels in, screaming my name, begging, pleading, but I turned my back. I looked out at the gutted ballroom, at the wreckage of the party, at the stunned faces of strangers who had worshipped a false idol. I saw Ivy standing by the exit. She was crying, but she wasn't watching her parents. She was watching me. She nodded. A small, brave movement. I nodded back. The screams faded as the heavy doors swung shut. The room went quiet. The screen behind me went dark. Clifton Parrish stepped out from the shadows of the wings, his cane tapping a steady rhythm across the stage. He put a hand on my shoulder. It's done, Gordon, he said softly. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 25 years. My ribs ached, my heart ached, but the weight was gone. Let's go, Clifton, I said, unbuttoning my tuxedo jacket. I need a drink, and I need to start living. We walked off the stage together, leaving the empty shell of the Vane Empire in the dark. I didn't look back. There was nothing there for me anymore. My son was dead, but I was alive. And for the first time in a long time, the future was blank, and it was mine. The Federal Detention Center in downtown Eugene was a concrete monolith that reeked of industrial cleaner and misery. It was a long way from the penthouse suites and ballrooms my son had grown used to. I sat in the visitor area on a metal stool bolted to the floor and waited. The room was cold. My ribs still ached, a dull and throbbing reminder of the price I'd paid to be standing here. But the pain felt far away now. The cost of admission to the final act. When the heavy steel door buzzed open, Caleb walked in. He wasn't wearing his Italian suit. He had on an orange jumpsuit that hung loose on his frame. His silver hair was unkempt, stripped of the expensive products and flattering lighting from the gala. He looked gray and ancient. He shuffled toward the plexiglass divider, wrists cuffed and chained to his waist, and fixed me with eyes that had been hollowed out by sleepless nights and the sudden shock of losing a life built on limitless power. He sat down. He didn't reach for the phone. He just stared at me. The arrogance had vanished, replaced by a shell-shocked blankness. "Pick it up," I said. My voice was steady. He hesitated, then lifted the receiver with a trembling hand. "Hello, Dad," he whispered. His voice was raw. "Hello, Caleb." "I am not Caleb," he said, a flicker of the old defiance lighting up his eyes. Caleb was weak. Elliot Vane built a legacy. "Elliot Vane is federal inmate number 14206, I replied. "And he is looking at life without parole." He leaned forward, chains rattling against the metal counter. "My lawyer says I can get a deal. The video is old. The audio from the alley is inadmissible without a warrant. I might get 20 years on the fraud, but I will be out. I will rebuild. I always do." I shook my head slowly. "You still don't understand what this is. You think it's a negotiation. It isn't. It's a foreclosure." I reached into my bag and drew out a thin stack of documents. I pressed them flat against the glass so he could read the bold headings. "This is a formal relinquishment of all claims to the Merritt family estate, including the house you tried to sell out from under me. And this is a permanent restraining order and disavowal of parental rights regarding Ivy. You will never contact her again. You will never attempt to reach her finances. You will never speak her name." He let out a laugh, dry, bitter, hollow. "Why would I sign that? The house is worthless next to everything else I lost. And Ivy, she betrayed me. She is dead to me." "Good," I said. "Then putting your name on this should cost you nothing." "I am not signing a thing," he spat. "You took my money, Gordon. You took my life. I will fight you until the day I die. I will drag this through the courts for decades. I will make sure Ivy burns through every penny she has on legal fees." I set the papers down. I leaned in close to the glass. "I figured you might say that. That is why I brought this." I pulled out a single photograph. It was old, grainy, yellowed at the edges. Not the video of the car crash. A picture of a toolbox, a red metal toolbox that had sat in the corner of my garage for 25 years. "Do you recognize it?" I asked. He stared. He frowned. "It is just your toolbox." "I opened it yesterday," I said. "I was hunting for a screwdriver to fix the lock you'd broken on the basement door, and I found something wedged behind the drawer. A receipt dated October 13th, 1998, the day before Derek died." Caleb went rigid, his eyes locked onto mine. "It is a receipt from a mechanic shop 2 towns over," I continued. "For a brake line modification with your signature on it, Caleb. You didn't just push him. You tampered with his car first, just in case the push didn't finish the job. You planned it out for weeks. That makes it a federal capital crime. Premeditated murder with special circumstances." His face drained to the color of ash. He began to shake. "You are lying," he whispered. "I burned that receipt." "You missed one." I lied. But he had no way of knowing that. He was a man whose whole life had been constructed on deception, and he assumed everyone around him played by the same rules. The fear in his eyes was genuine. He knew what that receipt would mean. It meant the death penalty or at best solitary confinement until he rotted away. "If you sign these papers," I said, pressing them to the glass again, "I will make this receipt disappear. I will let the feds stay focused on the fraud and the manslaughter charges. You will still go to prison, but you might see open sky again before you die. If you don't sign, I walk out of here and drop this on the prosecutor's desk." He looked at the photo. He looked at me. The last remnant of Elliot Vane, titan of industry, dissolved. He was nothing but a frightened little boy wearing an orange suit. "Give me the pen," he choked out. I slid the papers through the slot. He signed them, his hands shaking so badly he could barely keep the pen on the line. He pushed them back. Nadine was next. They brought her in 10 minutes later. She looked worse than he did. Her roots were showing, and her face was swollen from crying. When she saw the signed documents, she didn't argue. She didn't fight. She just looked at Caleb's signature and understood that she was alone. She scratched her name onto the page with a defeated hand. Surrendering the house. Surrendering Ivy. Surrendering the last threads of control she had held over my life. "It is over, Nadine," I said, as I gathered the documents. She looked up at me, eyes burning with a toxic mixture of hatred and misery. "You are going to hell, Gordon," she hissed. I stood and buttoned my coat. "I already went to hell, Nadine. I lived in your basement for 5 years. Now I am going home." I turned and walked away. I could hear her screaming behind the glass. Screaming my name, screaming for a lawyer, screaming at the sheer injustice of it all. But her voice came through muffled, swallowed up by the ambient noise of the facility. I walked out of the detention center and into the Eugene rain. The air tasted like something sweet. I had the papers in my hand. My house was mine again. Ivy was safe and the monsters were behind bars. I flagged down a cab. For the first time in 25 years, I had no reason to look over my shoulder. I was free. The sledgehammer connected with the drywall with a satisfying crack. Dust erupted into the air, coating my safety goggles white. I swung again, and this time the stud split. It wasn't destruction I was after. It was renovation. Ivy stood behind me, gripping a crowbar, her face streaked with plaster and sweat. She wasn't the terrified girl standing in the rain anymore. She was a woman taking her home back. We didn't sell the house. I couldn't bring myself to. Despite everything that had happened there, despite the years of being caged in that basement, this was still the place where I had once been happy. It was where I had raised a son before he became a stranger to me. So we decided to drive the ghosts out instead. We knocked down the wall between the kitchen and the living room and let the light pour in. We ripped up the carpets that carried the scent of Nadine's perfume. And most importantly, we pulled the door off the basement hinges and fed it to the backyard fire pit. The basement isn't a prison anymore. It is an archive. 3 months have passed since the day Elliot Vane ceased to exist. In that time, Ivy and I have kept ourselves busy. We didn't keep the money, but Clifton Parish made sure we held on to enough of the legitimate assets from the clawback to fund our new venture. We converted the ground floor of my house into an office. No sign out front, no ad in the paper, just a word-of-mouth network that grew from the letters I received after the story broke. The Merit Advocacy Group. We don't charge fees. We don't bill by the hour. We help the people who have been forgotten. The seniors whose children treat them like ATMs. The widows whose financial advisors are circling them like sharks. The people who get told they're imagining things when really they're just inconvenient. Clifton handles the legal threats. He enjoys it. He says rattling con artists who think they're untouchable keeps him young. Ivy handles intake. She quit the hospital the day after the arrest. She said she was exhausted from treating symptoms. She wanted to treat the disease. She sits with our clients. She holds their hands and she listens. She believes them. That is usually all they need, a witness to their own reality. And me, I am the forensic accountant. I follow the money. I uncover the hidden accounts, the forged signatures, the secret wire transfers. I find the truth they try to bury deep inside the spreadsheets. Yesterday, a woman named Mrs. Drummond came in. She was 82 years old, trembling, clutching a purse she had owned since 1969. She told me her nephew was managing her pension and that she couldn't figure out why she couldn't afford heating oil this winter. I went through her bank statements line by line. The transfers to a Vegas casino were right there. The withdrawals for a new truck plain as day. I looked at her sitting across from me and saw myself in that chair eating cold lentil soup. "We will get it back, Mrs. Drummond." I walked her through every cent and she began to cry. But how she asked. "He is family. Family doesn't leave you out in the cold," I told her. "Family is the people who show up with a blanket. We go to court on her behalf next week. Clifton says we will win. I know we will win because I've already turned up the nephew's second set of books. People ask me if I have any regrets about donating the $200 million. They ask whether I ever lie awake at 3 in the morning, wishing I'd held on to even a fraction of the vain fortune. I tell them no, and I mean every word of it. That money was a burden. It was dragged down by the soul of my dead son and the hunger of his wife. I had no desire to keep carrying it. I wanted to feel light. I have my pension, I have my house. I have enough for a good steak on Fridays and a bottle of bourbon to share with Clifton on the porch. I have Ivy who comes for dinner every single night and tells me about her day without once glancing at her phone. That is real wealth. That is the only currency worth a damn. Tonight, after we shut the files and locked up the office, Ivy and I settled onto the back porch and watched the sun sink below the tree line. The air had a sharpness to it, carrying the smell of pine and open woods. "You know, Grandpa," she said, swirling the ice around in her tea, "I got a letter today. From Dad." I went rigid. The restraining order was supposed to stop that. "What did it say?" I asked. She lifted her shoulders. "He wants a visit. Says he's a changed man. Says he found God inside his cell. Says he forgives me." She let out a dry laugh, a sound too worn for someone only 28 years old. "He forgives me," she said again, shaking her head. "Can you believe the arrogance? What are you going to do?" I asked. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the envelope, still sealed. She had only read the return address. She crossed to the fire pit where the embers from the old basement door still pulsed with heat. She dropped the envelope in. We stood there and watched the paper curl and go black, watched the blue ink of the federal prison stamp dissolve into ash. "I'm going to help Mrs. Drummond get her heating oil," she said. "That is what I'm going to do." I smiled. She was going to be all right. We both were. Before I stepped inside, I reached into my own pocket. I pulled out the photo I had shown Caleb in the prison, the grainy image of the red toolbox. I looked at it one last time. There was no receipt behind that drawer. There never had been. I had called his bluff with a bluff of my own. I had looked him square in the eye and lied with the same cold certainty he had turned on me for 25 years. The difference was that my lie bought freedom. His bought a cage. I struck a match and touched it to the corner of the photo. I let it burn until the flame reached my fingertips. I let it fall into the ash beside Ivy's letter. My son walked out the door one morning 25 years ago and never came back. I used to pray he would return, I used to leave the porch light burning for him. But I don't do that anymore. The man sitting in that cell is not my son. My son is a memory, a ghost of a boy who chased fireflies across this yard and laughed as he launched his bike over the creek. And that is where Gordon Merritt's story comes to rest. Not in a courtroom, not in a headline, but on a back porch watching an envelope turn to ash. I have thought a lot about what this whole road cost me. It cost me a son I had already grieved once, a marriage that was never what I believed it to be, and years I will never get back. But I believe God does not waste a person's suffering. The Lord's timing is rarely the timing we would have chosen, and yet looking back, every door that closed was pushing me toward the one that mattered. What I gained on the other side of all that loss was something no fortune could have purchased: clarity, purpose. And Ivy sitting beside me without once looking at her phone. If this story taught me anything worth passing on, it is this: trust what you see with your own eyes before you trust what someone needs you to believe. A scar does not lie. The people who move fastest to silence you are usually the ones with the most to hide. Do not let urgency be used as a weapon against your own judgment. Real family gives you time to think. And when you have nothing left but the truth, hold it carefully, because in the right moment, it is worth more than any amount of money ever could be. If Gordon's story moved, you leave a thought in the comments. I read everyone. Share this with someone who needs to hear that it is never too late to set things right. And if you have not yet subscribed to Family Revenge Stories, now is a good time. These are the stories that remind us who we really are. Thank you for spending this time with me. Until next time, take good care of yourself and the people who truly deserve you.